Would you describe your book of When the Rocks Sing as a guide?
I would. I would describe it as a guide of, telling a story about two people very much in love, about the loss that she and I both experienced in her passing. And then really, as much as anything, it's about helping people think about refining their sense of purpose, about finding the reservoir of resiliency that we all have within us, but we may not yet know it, about how to stay connected to your community and how to seek help. And for men, getting out of our own way to be able to embrace our own emotions and honestly come to grips with the impermanence of life in a way that also then gives us a sense of freedom and urgency about how we live.
Welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Kooler Garage Doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn. Today, I'm sitting down with two amazing people, Marv Weidner and Carol GoldfainDavis. They're co-authors of the book, When the Rocks Sing, a story of love, loss, and learning to live again. We're pulling on Carol's background as a grief counselor and Marv's story. And Marv, Carol, I'm so appreciative of you. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Are you both beaming in from Gunnison, Colorado?
I am.
Yes. Yeah. The beautiful sunny morning is great.
It is gorgeous today. I love it. I'd love to begin and build a little bit of context and story. So, Carol, I'll start with you. I'd love to hear just a little bit of a background of a summary of story. Maybe start where you grew up and how the Gunnison Valley found you and how you got into working in your profession.
Wow. Okay.
Loaded question.
3 sentences or less. I'll try.
You use a few more.
I grew up in a military family, so traveled a lot. And kind of had I think the outcome from that was sort of a bigger worldview, something I think that was helpful coming to this career later as a counselor, just being able to understand cultures, experiences, and there's more than one way to cook the soup, So, but I saw a lot of skilled people whose emotional lives were preventing them from accomplishing what they could with skill. So I went into this particular field of counseling. Came out to Gunnison kind of at a transition time in my life, about 2007-ish. So I'm not a pioneer here, but I've been here for a little while. Met my husband, and let's see, I began working actually in the hospice and home health section in Gunnison Valley, and got to know a lot of really good people, and kind of moved my practice more toward bereavement and grief and working with families that were dealing with loss. So that's where I met Marv and Marty, and that's kind of where this story began, kind of. The book's about.
Did you know at a young age that you would go into counseling? Did you always have this heart for helping people?
I think I always had an interest. Maybe all of us kind of have that. We should contribute something, or you want to help people in us. And so I went towards the medical field, did some work with teaching, deaf education, things like that. But didn't really land in that as much as, why did that person do that? Or what are they thinking? What are they feeling? Where's the wounding? And it was so impactful just in different points in my own life to have some help understanding loss, death, relationship, that I think that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Marv, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Iowa, in a small town, very traditional Midwestern lifestyle. Grew up in the cornfields, and my mom was a school teacher. My dad was a small car dealer, and I grew up doing what Midwestern boys do. Playing sports and being outside.
Yeah, I love that. And you are a consultant. How did you get into consulting, and how did the Gunnison Valley find you?
Well, it's a little bit of a story of first part of my life. So when I first came out of school, I was a United Methodist minister for a few years. I went to seminary at Northwestern University and spent a few years doing that. I'll tie it back to this later, but during that time, I conducted over 130 funerals and worked with grieving families during that time. I transitioned out of church work into state government and spent 20 years there doing things like refugee resettlement, welfare reform, and a few other, big projects. And coming out of that, I knew, what worked, what I thought worked in government and what did not work in government. And that was the basis that I used to start a small consulting company that since 1998 have been working with local governments and not-for-profits really all over the country. And one of those relationships began in 2007 with Gunnison County, and that's where you and I met in those years. So
that's great.
My wife Marty and I came here and started living here in 2012. But our life here began with our work with the county, meeting you and many other wonderful people, and of course this physical environment here is nothing short of inspiring. So that's how I got to Gunnison County.
Beautiful.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Kooler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommar Garage Door Openers. In our opinion, Sommars are the highest quality product on the market today. We recommend them for all of our residential garage door installs because of the variety of features they include, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features such as a fixed chain, which moves along a secure rail to ensure your garage door opens quietly and safely. Click on the link in the description to learn more about Sommar Garage Door Openers.
All right. Well, let's drop into the main topic, because I think this is going to be the real benefit for the listeners. And Marv, my question to you is, why author the book that you've written?
Well, as you know, and your listeners probably may not know, my dear wife Marty died from cancer in July of 2017. And as part of my grief process, I spent, it felt like, I'm sure to Carol, days and weeks counseling with her. And one of the things that she suggested I do is to begin a journal. And I wrote, every day in the journal. I would ask myself questions and develop the answers, or I would have thoughts or actions that I wanted to take. And coming through that process, and with Carol's encouragement, I think I was learning quite a bit about the grief process and what worked for me and maybe what would work for others. And the book really grew out of that desire to share what I was experiencing, to help others see perhaps themselves in my story and not feel alone in the grief process. And at some point, pretty far along in the writing process, I asked Carol if she would write from a counselor's perspective after each one of my chapters. And the reason I found that was that I found myself wanting to share more about how to respond, how to get help, how to reconnect with the community in ways that really were beyond my ability. I found myself starting to try to write things that I'm not really qualified to say. So I looked to the expert that I knew and the person who had helped me so much through the grief process. So that's how Carol and I then became co-authors of When the Rocks Sing.
Would you describe your book of When the Rocks Sing as a guide?
I would. I would describe it as a guide of, telling a story about two people very much in love, about the loss that she and I both experienced in her passing. And then really, as much as anything, it's about helping people think about refinding their sense of purpose, about finding the reservoir of resiliency that we all have within us, but we may not yet know it, about how to stay connected to your community and how to seek help. And for men, getting out of our own way to be able to embrace our own emotions and honestly come to grips with the impermanence of life in a way that also then gives us a sense of freedom and urgency about how we live.
There's so much gold right there, Marv. Carol, I'm curious on a, maybe a clinic level or human level, like how does grief get defined?
Defined. Wow. It's a pretty broad definition that I'm kind of thinking of. Probably I would say just the loss of anything, a loss being something important, something has taken place that gets in the way of your entire life function, changes you, changes the trajectory of your life, perhaps. And it can be on a giant scale of something as small as just, I really wish I would have gotten into that class. I didn't, I got kept out, to losing a spouse and beyond. I just think losses come in a variety of different colors and shapes. And the grief is just the resulting condition that you find yourself in, trying to cope and figure out how to relive your life. That would be a positive take on it. It can just devastate and paralyze us, really. So in order to come back out of that, it's actually a normal part of our life. We have grief that impacts us regularly. And depending on how you learn to cope with the small little situations of loss, it will impact how you cope with the big situations of loss, like of a person who's your mate, or your father or your daughter. All of those things, just getting grief, I think, just encompasses all of that, all of the things that get in the way of you being able to live what you thought you were going to live. And how you deal with that. What does it do to the rest of your functioning life, I guess, for lack of a better way to say that.
Yeah. Would you, and this is kind of an open question to either one, but what I'm hearing, especially Marv, when you talk about sense of purpose, resiliency, seeking help, community connection, being attuned to emotions. And I mean, what I'm hearing, especially when it's a big loss, and I can only imagine losing a spouse, because, after being with my wife for 20 years, she becomes part of my identity. And is like, this is the big challenge in a lot of ways, correct? Like, it's an identity shift. Like, not only is it a bundle of emotions, but it's a change in identity. Would you agree with that? Or
I would agree with that. In my case, losing, my beloved, my spouse, she was also my business partner, my co-parent. She and I did everything together. So no longer was I a married man. No longer was I part of a couple. Our family, completely, had to adjust to, this wonderful woman who, loved us all was gone. So it really is a shift in identity. And you mentioned purpose, Matt. My primary purpose in life during our 19 years together was to be the best husband I could possibly be to Marty. And that purpose just evaporated. And it took a while. It took, several months for me. It took a few months for me to realize that I had, my basic fundamental purpose in life was gone. And it left me very much adrift. And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of help, encouragement from Carol, my son, friends. And I landed on a sense of purpose for my own life, which is to live with an open heart. And rebuilding that sense of who you are, your identity in the world, really takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of time. And it's no small thing. The grief process can be very intense, as it was for me, with waves of grief just washing over me more frequently and bigger waves at first, and then those lessened in frequency and lessened in intensity. But the grief process really can shake your foundation, and refinding that sense of purpose and why am I still here? What do I want to do with my life now? Are really very fundamental questions that, when answered, you might find that you really do have a sense of purpose and a reason for continuing to be here. And, I would say for me, the loss really prompted a lot of self-examination, a lot of release of old hurts or old wounds or old emotions as well. And really, for me, forged what I hope is a more compassionate life as a result of this loss.
That's beautiful.
It's hard work.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, the spectrum of grief, from what I'm hearing, like small losses, whether it's not attaining a goal that one sets in business or athletics or whatever, like that actually has a little sting potentially to it, because we get locked in and it's part of who we are or who we want to become. And on a large scale, losing a spouse or a close family member, friend, like that can really, as you mentioned, shake the foundation. Why is it important to go into the hard work?
Cheryl, you want to do that?
Why is it important, Marv? Oh my goodness. Well, it would be, I guess, like pulling the rug out from under you completely. And then it's, wait a minute, I thought I knew who I was and where I was going. And I think if you don't take it seriously and it will dictate to you what happens and the feelings and the emotions, rather than you dictating, taking a hold of that and recognizing it and moving into it, looking at what it's actually done. And what you want to do with that. You still have the freedom to make all of those choices, but you just feel like you're just completely off balance. So I think you could go into a more severe place of being off balance if you don't look at it. And I think oftentimes, and I saw this a lot, probably in my own parents, when they experienced the loss of their parents or other friends being in the military, you would have all kinds of things occur. If they don't deal with it, it's the boss. The grief and the emotions and the feelings you don't understand are what dictate things. And I think it's a matter of taking back your choices and your ability to make decisions and who you are and the value of you and what you can contribute to the world. It's just taking that back. So we can stuff it, but I think it'll find a way to come out. You'll get terrible case of ulcers or be miserable. I really think it's just a matter of, like with anything, if you just look at it and realize that this is just an occurrence and how do I want my life to be as a result, is more of a self-determining choice that you can make.
That's a beautiful statement. If I could add, my experience to that was that I found that if I tried to deflect or push away or suppress the emotions that were coming up, the sadness for me, was that the emotion would stick to me. It was like it stayed inside me, right? If I could allow it, if I could embrace it, and this is especially a challenge for men, to embrace and express the emotion, I found that I was freer to breathe. I was freer to continue to move forward. So I made a commitment that no matter what I was doing, if the emotion came up, I was going to let it get expressed in the tears or the sadness or whatever I needed to do at the time. Even if I was working, I would excuse myself and allow those tears to come. And I think for me, that was really an incredibly powerful and important part of the healing process, is to allow those feelings to get expressed, to embrace them. And, as men, we don't have to be afraid of those emotions. Stuffing them, we should be very afraid of doing that because of all the things that Carol talked about. So that was, very much a very personal part of my experience that Carol explained.
Yeah. I love that perspective, and I resonate with that. I think that, for men and women to really feel is a challenge.
Yes.
It's not something that's, elevated in our society. We want to do, and we want to be doers, but we don't really get encouraged to feel and recognize what our body is feeling. And yet, if we don't take control over some of these experiences in our life, I agree, it's going to come out sideways somehow, and it'll be outside of our control. And certainly we could have the option to numb and ignore, but then it's just going to fester and eventually need to be dealt with one way or another. So for listeners that are tuning in, maybe they're dealing with small impacts of grief, maybe it's severe grief. What are some practical pieces? I heard journaling was a component for you, Marv, and I'm just curious, what are some other pieces that can help us go and touch these things that are thorny and uncomfortable, and yet it's likely healthy to do? What are some practical pieces for listeners?
Well, a couple that I would just mention from my own experience was the name of the book, the title of the book rather, is When the Rocks Sing. And that came from, I took a trip. I found that traveling alone really forced me to get back out into the world. And when I did that, I experienced the clarity of nature. When the Rocks Sing came from walking on a beach on the South Island of New Zealand, where I walked that beach for 3 days. And sometime during the second day, I began to hear the rocks on this beach were beaten into sort of a disc shape. And when a large wave would come in and then wash out over the top of them, they just chattered together, right? And I realized at that moment, that finally my mind was quiet enough and my heart was calm enough for me to actually hear the sounds and the beauty of nature again. And my wish in the book is that for everyone who's experienced a loss, that they too will come to a time when their mind is quiet enough and their hearts are calm enough to actually hear beautiful, messages and sounds of nature. So getting out into nature, getting back out into the community, were very, very important things for me and part of my resiliency. And I know Carol has much more to say about this topic.
I think one of the things I admired about Marv, because was just something within him that kind of became a courageous ability to move and act. And that's not always the case, because we completely feel paralyzed and lost and off balance. So I appreciated the fact that he was willing to just move right into it. And I think sometimes, initially you're just so off balance that I think you just sort of need some time to yourself. But I would say initially one of the most important things would be one of the statements that Marv, I believe, makes in the book is, don't do this alone. Their grief is real. It's a common human experience. But we're not meant to try to live, I don't think, as an isolated being. We really need a team around us that loves us, cares for us, supports us, will listen to what we have to say, which is a lot of the processing of just thoughts that are just needing a place to go. Someone to hear you is vital, really vital. So I would say a support team around you, people that are supportive, not judgmental, just willing to listen. They don't have to have the answers, because there aren't any good, clear answers. It's not a fixable thing, but it is a place where you, that one or two or three friends that you've told, just listen to me. You don't have to fix me. I'm working on this myself. But just listen. And that's something that can be provided by any good friend or a counselor, someone that will just hear you and perhaps give back what they hear you say to you. But mostly it's just a place to go and express everything that's going on, the confusion and the chaos that has occurred. So I would say a support team is probably number one. And maybe educating them to say, hey, can I just sort of blab for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 3 minutes? It's not going to be pretty, and you don't have to make sense of it. I just need a place to vent. And those people are valuable that can just listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about that, Marv? Is there something else that brings up?
Well, it just brings up a lot of good memories about staying connected with, I guess, my team of supports. And, it also leads into then how does one be with someone else who's experienced a loss? Right? And I think the wisdom that you expressed, Carol, and what I experience is that if someone is experiencing a loss, just be with them. Don't try to fix them. Don't say very much, say very little, and listen. And give them a safe space to be themselves, whatever that is, whether that's, talking or crying or sitting on a riverbank, drinking a beer, whatever it is. I remember a couple of friends after Marty passed and my son was here, took us out fishing, right? So we didn't talk about anything heavy at the time. They just let us be, right? And I remember catching fish and crying at the same time. So it was like that, right? Just be with them and don't say very much, and let it be about them and not you when you're trying to be with someone who's grieving.
Yeah, holding that open space. This question's arising: are there gifts in loss?
Yes, there are gifts in loss. For me, I think it helped me open my heart further to life, to embrace the impermanence of life and see the beauty of that. I think our culture really tries to shy away and is afraid to talk about the impermanence of life. And I think embracing it, well, there's a Buddhist saying, and it says, face death at any moment and live life fully at all times, right? Which captures for me and captured for Marty, that sense of balance of, life isn't all just one thing. It's not all loss and it's not all love. But it's really the fullness of life and the entirety of the experience. And I found the greater the love, the greater the loss, right? The greater the love of a job, the greater the loss if you lose it. The greater the love you have of a person, the deeper the connection, the greater the loss. But that's also the beauty of human life. And embracing our humanity, I think, gives us a great deal of freedom, a sense of urgency to be present in each moment and each day. So I would express the benefits of the grief and the loss process in that way.
That's well said. I would tend to agree with the expression of humanity needing the super highs and the super lows. And that ultimately when we collapse them, that's when we get into that present moment of tears and love. And without opening our hearts and being that vulnerable to experience those real lows, we're not, if we hold ourselves back from feeling the lows, we're also holding ourselves back from feeling the epic highs. I feel the presence in the hearts, in this conversation, and I really want to recognize you both. And I appreciate the vulnerability that you bring into the world, Marv, with sharing your loss and putting this book out there in the realm of helping folks and really doing what you do, because I think this is an extension of what I've seen you play as the consultant role and in making things better and operate better for people. So I appreciate that. As we start putting a bow tie on our conversation today, I'm curious from both of you, what are we excited for?
Pretty excited. What comes to mind, Marv? Do you have something right off?
Yeah, I'm excited about what the universe, the world is going to bring my way today. I'm excited about what's next, and I don't know what's next, but I'm back in love with life. I'm still in love with life, and I'm excited about really, as I said, what's next. And it, if you live with an open heart, it can get crushed through that vulnerability, but it's the vulnerability that also opens you up to what may come your ways in ways that you can embrace it and bring joy and love into your life.
Beautiful. What are you excited for, Carol?
And I am excited for people to read Marv's story. I had one gentleman write me the other day, and he said, I just felt like I was kind of, all of my experience, he had also lost his wife, was to feel calm and seen and recognized. And this is sort of normal. I'm not the only one going through this, I guess. And it was just a sort of a surprise that he said that. But just to know that we are all experiencing those same things, and it adds that richness when you can hold it from the positive sense of all of the memories and all that you've learned and the compassion that you feel for everyone else around you that's also experiencing that same thing. I think it broadens us that way. I think we don't want that. We don't think it's a good thing, but there's something very enriching and I guess broadening is probably the word about the whole experience and moving through that together with other people. There's a closeness and a deeper relationship that you can establish with them from that.
Yeah, well said. for the listeners, if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, either one of you, and find the book, how do we do that?
Well, I don't have a big social media presence, but I am on Facebook, and you can reach me through that or message me. The book is virtually everywhere. It's on Amazon, if you don't mind buying things from Amazon, or if you'd like to buy it through the publisher itself. It was published from Ballast, Ballast Books, Ballast Books, and it's on their website. It's also on Barnes & Noble and, wherever you might find books as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. How do we reach you, Carol?
And I was going to say, I think we also have a copy in our library.
We do. We do have copies in our libraries. That's correct.
So you can check it out or even read it on a Kindle. That's actually an option. And I am just in there's a called a counseling collaborative in Gunnison. Probably you can find me in the phone book too. Still doing a small counseling practice here. And I do have a website. It's not terribly active. Mostly people just give me a phone call or send me a text and buy my phone,
Yeah.
So I would add one other thing and that is locally here in the Valley, I know you've had members of Living Journeys on your podcast, Matt, and I know how involved and committed you and Annie are. So you can get the book through Living Journeys. They are giving them free. There's a group on the Western Slope called Hope West that I just learned about as a hospice, I think, network on the Western Slope that is using the book in their book club upcoming, and I think that they've asked for maybe a speaker for one of us or both of us in August. So Hope West is also engaging in the book.
Beautiful. We'll include these links and give listeners the option to pick this up in our show notes. So please check it out. And again, I want to recognize you too. This conversation is really rich on the humanity side, and I think as we get better, personally in recognizing, it's not a dealing with, it's a recognizing and moving through with emotions that can sometimes be uncomfortable. Like ultimately, as we can gain this skill set, I do think it goes into living longer and living more fuller and broader is rich. And so as listeners, if we are experiencing any level of grief, like what I heard out of this was courage, taking the courage to connect, taking the courage to get out into nature, taking courage to journal and to feel these emotions. It's a really important part of human. So with that, Marv, Carol, thank you so much. I want to just give you a few moments. If you have any final words for listeners, we'll close out this conversation, and I appreciate you.
Well, thanks for having us on, Matt. I think this podcast is, just such a great service to our broader community here in Colorado and beyond to have these kinds of very human conversations. So thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the, just the chance to say something a little different that people are usually uncomfortable talking about. And we need to know it's okay just to push those words out. Sometimes it feels like you're pushing through a brick wall just to say, I'm kind of hurting today. You want to just sit and talk or sit down and have a cup of coffee or something like that, and just be honest and open. And I think that helps the other people around you too. So thank you so much, Matt. You're great.
Well, thank you guys. I look forward to seeing you both in person very, very soon. And again, thank you for the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. We count on your subscriptions, your likes, your shares, and I encourage you to do that now. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, lower right-hand button. If you're on audio, download this, share it, and we look forward to having you on the next one.